Three guys, hot debates, bold takes, and yes, we may not always find the end zone, but hey, we always put points on the board. Settle for three, where the only thing we take seriously is the game.
All right, guys, welcome to Settle for Three, episode 5. Joey, Cameron, Evan, how you guys doing?
Fantastic. Happy New
Happy
Year.
2025. Doing well.
Before we get to the show, Evan, Cam helped me buy a new car this past week. Do you want to guess the make and model? If you get it right, I'll Venmo you $5 right now. You got to get the make
Right.
and the
I'm
model right.
still, yeah, I would say you warned me about this. And, I don't know if I'm right or not, but just knowing Cameron, I think it's going to be a Toyota Tacoma.
No, Toyota Highlander.
Oh, gosh. All right.
Hey, I gotta give
Can
him
I,
credit though. He got the brand right. He's halfway
hold
there.
on. Hold on. Can I get like 250? I got the brand right.
Maybe.
Okay. All right. We'll talk about it later. Yeah, it's fine.
Uh, Cam, I'll throw this question to you real quick. Is it weird knowing we still have almost 2 weeks left in the college football season? Because we'd be playing a national championship game in a few days from now. This was last year.
I- Hey, I think any extra time of seeing some college football is an absolutely amazing thing. I'm all for it. I love it.
All right, guys, let's show you what's coming up today. So we're going to recap the quarterfinal games. We had four of them. One of them was good. The others were not. Then we'll preview the semifinals. That's the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl. And then our third topic, we're going to look at the transfer portal winners and losers. There are some clearly defined winners and losers. Cameron and Evan will each give us those. But before we can get to the quarterfinal games, let's take a look at the bracket. We are down to four: Texas, Ohio State, Penn State, Notre Dame. Cam, I'm going to start you off here. All the teams with first round buys went bye bye. Seeds 1 through 4 all lost. Are you surprised?
Uh, by a couple of them, maybe. Obviously, Oregon got screwed with the current layout of how things are set up. But you can look at some of those other teams. Penn State had legitimately the only easy route into this spot. Notre Dame had to play a backup at quarterback, and Texas kind of floundered through that second game. In general, are these teams surprising? No. I think we easily could have gotten here, and it makes sense. This isn't completely illogical. Now, it's funny as if Arizona State had beaten Texas, I think I may give a different answer.
Evan, you got a follow up?
Yeah, surprising, maybe not for two of the teams, right? But you got Oregon, who was undefeated going into this. I'm not gonna say surprising, but definitely not expected. And same with Georgia, right? And this, it just kind of goes back to the point that we made a couple weeks ago, that so many changes need to happen in the 12 team playoffs, and it's better that all of these scenarios happen now in the first year, rather than going 5 6 years down the line where we demand, let's say four more people get in the playoffs in a whole new restructuring of all of it. So yeah, surprising for as a whole, but some of these, I think it just highlighted some points that we made a couple weeks ago about how things needed to change.
All right, I totally agree. Let's go ahead and get into it. Here's your quarterfinal results. Let's start with Penn State, Boise State. Boise State outgained Penn State, but had four turnovers. Evan, you're not going to beat a team that's bigger and more talented than you when you turn the ball over.
Yeah, Penn State looks really, really good, and they've been winning the turnover margin quite a bit this season. It just, I'm going to be honest, it wasn't a great game. I think the first quarter, I was actually kind of surprised with how Boise State came out of the gate. It was pretty close throughout that first quarter and even the whole first half, but second half of that second quarter and then onwards, Penn State just really pulled away, and it just wasn't that much of a competition. Ashton Genty never really could get going, and his blocking just wasn't there. I think Penn State just showed Boise State why they lost their only other big matchup of the year, and just made sure that they were not going to make that quarterfinal or semifinal.
I have one follow up for you, Evan. So, Boise State, SMU, Indiana, which of those three teams was most worthy of the playoff spot?
Oh, that's hard. And even though I've been so hard on them this entire season, I'd probably go Indiana on that, only because of who they lost to this
Mhm.
season, right? They lost to Ohio State away, and Ohio State, which we'll get to in a second, is just an incredible team. Indiana, they had all the makings of somebody that I didn't necessarily see towards the beginning. So I'll probably go Indiana on that one.
Cam, the floor is yours.
Well, to your question of which one of those three teams I think deserve to be in there, the term deserved, we've gone through before, is not something that any team should ever receive. None of those teams should have been in the playoff. It should have been South Carolina, Ole Miss, and honestly, that may be it. After watching Alabama lose to Michigan, I don't think Alabama should have been in. I think it should have been Alabama or Ole Miss. I think they would have been beaten any one of those teams, and they would have been favored to do it.
It's not
How
fair
about
to
of
say
those
that.
three teams? Yeah.
Yeah, I said none of them. I don't think any of them deserve to be in there. SMU's, the cutie pies, the ACC. You have Boise State, who has Ashton Genty. They had a great season. Ashton Genty's amazing, but I can't confidently say that they could go up against a Penn State or any of the other four teams that we have left in the playoff.
Mhm.
Or, sorry, three teams left.
But hold
And
hold on, hold on, hold on. To that point, Cameron, I don't know that Ole Miss, South Carolina, or Alabama could have gone up against them either.
you don't think that Ole Miss, with the D line that held Georgia to 10 points, could have gone up against Boise State or SMU?
I mean, we'll get to the Georgia game in a second with how they
I'm
performed,
leaving
but
leaving alone the fact that Jackson Dart and that Ole Miss offense exist. Okay. You also have Lenora Sellers. I'm leaving Alabama off the table on this one. I have to look at the teams that actually proved themselves this year. I would take in a blindfold match, Ole Miss or South Carolina against either of those two teams, include, Boise State in there. I don't know how you couldn't. I'm sorry, Indiana in there against any one of those three teams. I would take either one of those two SEC ones.
uh, but let's go back real fast. Those were the teams that were in. Who deserved to be there the most? How about that?
None of the
We
three.
we know Cam
Just give
doesn't
you three
believe in
other teams.
deserving. Any three other teams but
Thank you,
those,
Joey.
according to Cam. Yeah. Hey, okay, Cam, real quickly, get to this Penn State Boise State game.
Penn State, Boise State. The score is not indicative of how much of a blowout this was. I believe it was 24-7 at half. I know what the final score looks like. It's a 17-point. Ashton Genty actually didn't have a horrendous game. They did a good job, or he did a great job of breaking tackles. The offensive line did him no justice. But I think the score is indicative of how the game went.
All right. Well, the only thing I want to say about this is Genty, he's projected to be a first round pick. There's no doubt about that. Some places have him top 10. So he didn't break the record, but I think the dude is going to be just fine. He's going to make a lot of money here in a few months. So let's move on. We're going to do the best game of the quarterfinals, which was a surprise, I think, to most of us. Texas, Arizona State, double OT, 39-31 to Longhorns winning. Lots of late game heroics. But Cam, the missed targeting call on Texas with over a minute to play likely cost the Sun Devils a chance to win it in regulation.
We need help on officiating. We're not going to dive into that on this episode. We'll leave that alone. The MVP for this entire week of quarterfinals was Cam Scattaboo. Played absolutely lights out. 30 carries for 143 yards, nearly 5 yards a carry on that great Texas defense. And he also had 8 receptions for 99 yards. Truly a lights out performance. If there was ever an argument that he should have been at the Heisman committee or at the Heisman, ceremony, this was probably it. He played everything that he could, including the vomit and find your own way back into the
Mhm.
game. I love the spirit. I love the enthusiasm. Way to play. Arizona State, Joey, you mentioned it. For a fourth quarter comeback, gave every bit of heart and soul that they possibly could to be there. And it was enough. They just weren't given the opportunity due to the lack of officiating calls by the officials. It was truly an egregious no call, and it sucked to see that's how the game ended. Yes, we went into 2 overtimes. We started to see where raw talent started to come into fruition. Quinn Ewers, we'll talk about him a little bit more later, played lights out when lights really mattered. And I do think that is worth talking about in a few minutes.
So I will say, when that targeting call was missed, Cam, you texted us, and I could feel your anger coming through the text.
Yeah, it was New Year's Day. I didn't go out for New Year's Eve, so I was enjoying my New Year's Day, doing fun activities, and I was at a bar with a couple of friends. And while I'm sitting there, I look up at the screen and I'm, essentially yelling like it's an Alabama game, only to be told that it's not an Alabama game and that not my team got screwed, but it still upsets me to watch a team that really was vying for that win and doing everything within their power to be there under a minute to go in the game, or maybe it was a minute and 5 seconds, just to have that taken away. Obviously they had the opportunity when they went into double overtime, but they couldn't quite complete it. I do think if this game ends in regulation, at least they have the opportunity to kick. They don't miss it twice like Texas did.
Yeah, I'll just yes. So Scadaboo, he put that team on his back. Honestly, all of Arizona State and Joe, you said this also in our group text. Arizona State, they were America's team
Hmm.
in that game. I started out really, really kind of hoping that Texas might prove the point for why certain teams should be in the finals and why certain ones not. But I found myself rooting for Arizona State nearly the entire game once they started that comeback. I mean, the story of the game was Texas played. I hate to say it because Arizona State's a really talented team, but they played down to their competition, and Arizona's played up above their competition for a majority of the game. Yeah, a couple blown calls, couple missed opportunities. Texas pulled it out, and nothing against them. Quinn Ewers, he played a phenomenal game. The Texas defense, they had a couple missteps throughout the entire game, but finished it out. It was just a really disappointing game going forward. And this was one of the cool things where you realize that, I mean, it's working, right? The amount of teams that are in the playoffs, there are more teams that deserve to be there than pretty much any of us realized at the beginning of this season. Again, Arizona State picked to be last in their division the entire year. Somehow made it to a bye and almost knocked off Texas. What a cool story to go forward. So really disappointing from their perspective, but just good play and really good closing it out on the Texas side.
And you said something right there that points to my last point. I don't know if Arizona State was a better team than we thought, or if Texas simply just got complacent in the fourth quarter, but Cam Scadaboo, that guy is the real deal. And he has the type of energy and emotion that we want to see in college football athletes that we don't see nearly enough of now because of NIL and other things, because it's treated like a business. Cam Scadaboo's the real deal. I think he could have an NFL future, but we will have to
Yep.
see. Let's move on to the worst game of the quarterfinals. That would be 8 seed Ohio State just stomping top seed Oregon 41-21. It was 34-0 at one point in the first half. Evan, I think this game says less about Oregon and more about how the Buckeyes are simply playing their best football right now.
I'm just going to start out by saying thank you for giving me first crack at this because as a Tennessee fan, this game made me feel a lot better
Hmm.
about what happened to us. And I'll go ahead and say it. I went into this saying Ryan Day needed to win the national championship to keep his job. I think he's pretty much solidified his spot at this point. I've pretty much changed my tune there. Maybe Cameron doesn't agree, but Ohio State, they made an amazing, not a good, an amazing Oregon team look like,
Pedestrian.
yeah, they just did not look good at all. Dylan Gabriel really couldn't get it going. We said this last week. The defensive line of Ohio State was going to have to beat Oregon's offensive line in order to win this game. And they did that, and not just a little bit. They did it in such a convincing manner that Oregon never had a chance to come back. This was a great Oregon team that went undefeated the entire season, beat some really, really good teams, including Ohio State earlier in the season. And there was just no looking back after Ohio State went up early in the first quarter, and they just kept it going the entire time. So I'm kind of all in on Ohio State at this point. Just don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but they are absolutely the front runners after making it past a gauntlet of an opening in this bracket where nobody else had to go through the games that they did.
All right. So my thoughts on this game. It was 34-8 at halftime. It's really my thoughts on the game. It was a crappy game. Uh, Josh Pate did, I think, the best job on opening this up. Sometimes a team operates in a manner of a buzzsaw. Doesn't matter if you're Oregon, your SMU, your Boise State, doesn't matter. You go up against that program, it's going to get ugly. Oregon hasn't been playing up at this point in the season. Quite honestly, I'm not surprised to see that this was the outcome of that game. Was I hoping for a more competitive game? Yeah, I think we all were. But I don't think it hit any of us as a surprise. 34-8 at half. Final note.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and if I may, just this game might as well have been 100-2 from the way this was played. There was no, even though the score was a little bit closer, there was no competition between these two teams. I was shocked by how this turned out.
You guys know how red the stadium was there? I felt like, I don't know if just maybe it was the camera and I couldn't see people in their green, but I just felt like that was 80% Ohio State fans there.
It was a lot.
Yeah, they travel
Ohio
well.
State knew it was coming.
All right, well, let's not waste any more time on that. The final game, Notre Dame, Georgia. And before we get to the game, as you guys know, it was pushed back a day due to the terrorist attack on Bourbon Street. Obviously, that was a very serious incident and warranted pushing the game back to, just make sure everyone involved was safe. And then 2 days after the game, we found out Kirby Smart's father, Sonny, passed away. He actually fell while in New Orleans, had surgery, had complications from surgery, and passed away. Our condolences to the Smart family. But I mean, obviously, just two sad situations that probably overshadowed the game a little bit. But just focusing back on the game, Notre Dame opened as a slight favorite after their first round win. Then all the money went to Georgia, shifting the line in their favor. Cam, I think the Irish proved better's wrong.
This is kind of a hard one. And Joey, before I get going, I do want to say condolences out to those that were injured in New Orleans and to Kirby's father,
Yeah.
both of which were, horrendous. Obviously, the New Orleans tragedy on New Year's was truly unspeakable.
Hmm.
As far as the game itself, Notre Dame, Georgia, I don't want to take anything away from Gunnar Stockton. Notre Dame has a very legitimate defense. We all, I think, acknowledge that. We know that. And I think that Gunnar was put into a very hard situation trying to come in against a very hard team, quite frankly. I don't think that the scheme did anything to help him. I think Mike Bobo should be sitting on his hands right now, hoping that he keeps his job through the end of the year. But quite frankly, yeah, it's kind of how I feel. Notre Dame's defense, I think, is the entire talk of the game. 10 points allowed, 0 points in the second half. They allowed only 62 yards of rushing. ETN never even got going. Gunnar Stockton did nothing with his legs, even though he's a dual threat. I think those are pretty much all your talking points. It's really Notre Dame did everything they could to stop that Georgia team on anything offensive that they tried to do.
So, obviously, again, like Cameron said, obviously, hearts out to everybody from the New Orleans tragedy all the way to Kirby Smart. For the game, definitely agree. This was it started out as kind of a good game. It ended up as not that the score would suggest it, but a blowout. This was, I was wondering. This was the big question mark going into this game. Gunnar Stockton, yeah, he led the Bulldogs to an SEC championship, no doubt. However, Texas was gearing up for a high flying offense of Carson Beck, not a dual threat quarterback like Gunnar Stockton. On the flip side, they were absolutely prepared on Notre Dame's defense for Gunnar Stockton. And the fact that Bobo did not let him run the ball almost at all. I think I saw one option play early on in the first half, and it went for a loss. And that was it. they really, really should have run him out, let him spread out the defense as much as possible, and then try and take some deep shots because he can do that too. It was really bad play calling by the Georgia offense, and that's what led to Notre Dame pulling away. And the 98-yard return to start the second half by Notre Dame for the kickoff that pretty much sealed the deal. It's a Georgia team that is not made to play from behind very often.
I think I took them being behind at the half. I think I bet it like 5 games this year and I hit every single one. I mean, they won because they were a second half team. My last point, this was Notre Dame's first win in a major bowl game since the 1994 Cotton Bowl. 30 years, guys. So I think that's really going to propel this
Crazy.
team forward. If they win it all, I mean, you're going to look back at this Georgia game and say this was the moment that they got over the hump. But let's move on, huh?
Joey,
Uh,
I'm gonna make
yeah,
one
go ahead.
crazy statement here,
Okay.
and I'm probably going to catch a lot of flack because I've been saying it all year. Sometimes there is glue that holds a team together. Carson Beck did not have a great season. I think we can all agree.
Yep.
I think Carson Beck was actually the glue that held that Georgia offense together. I think if he is playing in that game, it is a different outcome. And I've been somebody that's been very down on his play all season. I think it's been primarily his receivers. I think he will be successful at the next level.
Agreed.
Agree. All right, guys. Well, we have 2 more games this week. The semifinals. For the first time ever, they'll be played on 2 different nights. We'll have the Cotton Bowl, I believe that's Friday game, and then the Orange Bowl is coming up on Thursday. I really quickly just want to start with the Cotton Bowl because I think that's a really intriguing matchup. Evan, Ohio State's a 5.5 point favorite, 6.5 depending on your sports book. I really like that line for the game because even though both these teams have a lot of talent, just the way the Buckeyes are playing, they just look unbeatable right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get into these picks, Cameron, I'm just want to throw this out there now. I'm going to make a bet with you
No,
that
you won't.
yeah,
No,
if
you
if I do
won't.
yeah, if I do better on these picks next week, you're gonna have to eat a lot of hot sauce. You accept?
I'm going to accept it, but you're doing the same
It
thing. I will
well
win. You
only
will
yeah,
lose.
yeah. If I lose, absolutely loser of this, doing hot sauce, and it's got to be for the first segment before we take a drink of water. You good with that?
But what are conditions if we tie?
If you
Well,
tie,
then we
then
both
I'm
do.
going to pick one of you to do the hot sauce, and it's going
Oh,
to be
Just one
wow.
of
whichever.
us. All
It's
right.
it's going to be whichever one of you is not on my nice list. So,
Oh my
Cameron.
God.
Absolutely.
Joey's
So
picking favorites.
so Cameron,
Joey, I
what?
love I love your new car.
Thank you, Cameron. That was directed at you because I worked on a nice long Google Doc for this show. You didn't look at it once, and
Proud of you.
so
Hey,
you're in my crosshairs. But
duly noted.
let's get right into this game, Evan.
Yeah. So look, I'm an Ohio State believer after last week. I really thought that Tennessee maybe just played down to what they've done the entire season. Ohio State just proves time and time again, other than a fluke against Michigan and a really tight game against Oregon early on in the season, they are the front runner for this national championship. Texas, on the other hand, they have played down to a lot of competition. These are the two most talented rosters in all of college football.
Agreed.
Both of them have an obscene amount of money on their rosters. Ohio State, Ryan Day has developed that roster into a national championship team. And Sark, he just hasn't done it. They have no doubt the best quarterback room in all
Mhm.
of college football with Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning behind the wheel.
You
They
can
just
only
haven't
play
been able
one
to
at
get
a
it
time.
done.
You can only play one quarterback at a
Exactly.
time.
They have not been able to do almost any good game in a convincing fashion. Even the ones that they have pulled out, it has not been good. If you tell me almost any of the other teams went up against Arizona State, who yes, they played amazing in their game against Texas. I think it's a whole different story in a whole different bracket. I'm going to take Ohio State in this one. That over under of 5.5. I mean, just how they played the last 2 weeks, it might as well be a 20-point line. I don't think it's going to be close.
I agree. Cam?
All right, Ohio State looks unstoppable, and Texas looks more human than ever. Is that an illusion or is that reality? Let's dive into
Uh,
it.
it's
All right,
reality.
margin. Here's some really funny stats for you. Margin of victory during the playoff. The average pregame spread for Ohio State is 4.5 points. They were favored in both games.
Wild.
Okay. The Texas Longhorns were also favored in both games at a minus 13 spread. Ohio State won by an average of 22.5 points against that 4.5 point spread average. And Texas won by an average of 11 against that 13-point spread. So we're here looking at these fun stats. And I really was looking for like any reason in the world to look to buy into Texas. And the further into it I got, the closer I actually became to taking them. So Ohio State's offensive production, they have almost 1,100 yards. Now, Texas, though, has 1,000 yards. So, like, offensively, they're both going great. The biggest problem is the offensive productivity that we know is coming out of Ohio State and where it's coming from. Ohio State has 550 yards per game, and they're going 630 through the air over those two. Jeremiah Smith has absolutely lit it up with almost 300 yards, averaging 22 yards per catch. Insane. And then you have 465 yards that are basically evenly split between Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. I look at that and I'm like, this is insane. For context, Miami led the country with 537 yards per game in the regular season against the number 55 strength of schedule. Ohio State did that against Oregon and against Tennessee. That the numbers just don't match up. I have to agree with you, Evan. I looked for basically every reason for me to take Texas, and I just couldn't quite do it. Texas, in order for them to try and be successful, they need to be outscoring their opponent, or sorry, they need to start fast. In the first quarter, they've outscored their opponents 35-0. Ohio State's weak link, though, is in the secondary. Oh, sorry. I'm actually speaking about Texas's road to success here. So yeah, Ohio State has scored 35-0 in the first half, or sorry, first quarter. Ohio State, though, their weak link defensively has been in the secondary. If you avoid Caleb Downs and establish the run, I think you may actually have an opportunity here. In order for Ohio State to be successful, you need to annihilate the Texas defensive line, which no one has done. Plan to rush for 200 yards, which I don't think is possible. You need long and methodical drives, and a shootout is probably not what you're looking for. But yeah, it's just not really in the cards, I don't think.
So
I'll take Ohio State.
you like them to cover too?
5.5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Cam, I have one follow-up point for you. This Ohio State team, are they more of a surprise than the 2014 Ohio State team that kind of got hot at the end?
Evan, who are the two most talented teams in college football this season?
These two, Ohio State, Texas.
Joey, to your response there, we've both been saying Ohio State is probably the most talented or number two behind Texas. I'm not at all surprised that they're in the playoff. Before the season, I think that they were the anticipated number one team in the country.
Fair enough. I expect this game to blow through the over. It's 53 and a half. I could see both teams scoring in the 30s, but Buckeyes are going to win, and they're going to cover. So I'm going to take the over, and
Honestly,
I'm going to take the Buckeyes to cover.
I'm just hoping at this point that Ohio State plays an opponent that I don't just want to turn off the game halfway through. I I just want a good game at this point. And so far in this playoffs, there's been maybe two.
One.
Yeah, most likely one. Yeah.
Yeah, the first round games were so long ago, I can't even remember them at this point.
Yeah, it's been a long
They
ride.
weren't good.
All right, let's move on. The second game, that's at the Orange Bowl. That is the first game. That's Thursday night. Notre Dame, Penn State. Notre Dame is basically a pick 'em favorite. Cam, Penn State seems to be hitting their stride, but they've also had the easiest path of the four remaining teams, beating up on SMU and Boise State. Are you drinking the Penn State Kool-Aid?
Evan, I'll ask you a question. Is Penn State a team of time of possession?
You know what? For you, I actually looked up this stat.
I hate you. In the
Both of
playoffs.
these teams are within 10 seconds of each other for the season, just over 30 minutes each.
Oh, you didn't look up the stats close enough. Okay, so Penn State in the playoff, you are wrong. Penn State has only controlled the ball for 40% of their games. They are not controlling time of possession, yet they have won the games by an average of like 17 points. So they're absolutely killing it. Notre Dame, on the other hand, is controlling time of possession by 56% or 16% up on Penn State. So the way that I'm kind of looking at this, you have Penn State that has Drew Aller, who's efficient. You have Nicholas Singleton, and you have Katron Allen, who have all been extremely dominant this offseason, or sorry, in the playoffs. And then you look over at the Notre Dame side, and they're methodical. But in the two games that they've played, I don't know that this game quite adds up. I'm going to take Penn State. I really like James Franklin in this game. I feel that they look really good. I think 20 points may be all this game actually takes to win.
This interesting take, and I don't necessarily disagree with you either. I was back and forth on this game a lot up until I mean just before we started. I'll get it out of the way now, saying that I'm taking Penn State. Their level of competition, personally, I believe, has been a little bit better throughout the playoffs and really just throughout the entire season. Notre Dame, they have gotten consistently better the entire season, and they had a really good win over Georgia. But again, what do you chalk that up to? Is it from a Georgia team not playing as well as it has throughout the entire time? Is it them getting the better of Georgia, or is it just Georgia having somebody at the helm who has not run this offense the entire season and a bad offensive coordinator? Either way, none of those points direct at Notre Dame having the upper hand on a lot of this. Penn State, they have a much better defense and a much better offense and a really, really good defense. Notre Dame, they have a really good offense, but not as good. And they have a slightly better defense. This line of 1.5, it might as well be a tie. And I think that's a pretty good line considering how evenly matched both of these teams are. I just think Penn State's gonna pull this out. I don't know if Riley Leonard is going to be able to get it done with his legs, which was so impactful against that Georgia defense, with him being able to throw them off guard. I just think Penn State's going to be way too good in this game and too physical.
You
I
know,
do think the potential X factor here, though, is if Riley Leonard can get his legs going and open it up, I can see this game
It-
being
yeah, it
really
could
a
be a
toss
whole
up.
different game. Yeah, it could be a whole different game if Riley Leonard can get it going. Penn State's rushing defense is just they're really really good, and they can get to the ball so quickly on that defensive side. And again, I just don't know if Notre Dame is going to be able to stop this really deep ball kind of offense that Penn State has been playing the last couple weeks. That's why their time of possession's been down. They've been able to score too quickly. I mean, time and time again. Doesn't matter how much Notre Dame can control the ball throughout the entire time if they can't stop them.
well, guys, my heart says Notre Dame, but I'm going to agree with you guys. It's going to be Penn State. Just a fun fact here on why you should hammer the under in this game. It's 46.5. I agree. The winning team may score 20 points. These two teams combined for 78 rushing attempts compared to just 49 passing attempts in their games last week. So I fully expect that we get a slow-paced game, a very Big Ten type of game, and I like Penn State. So we ready to move on? Anyone got a final point on the semifinals?
Let's go for it.
Okay.
Send
Well,
it.
our third topic tonight, the transfer portal. And guys, there is so much to discuss with this. We're going to do a huge deep dive into this in the off season when we're desperate for stuff to talk about. There's so much to talk about with the transfer portal. But basically, it opened December 9th, closed December 28th. But for today, let's just focus on the winners and losers. These are 247 Sports top 25 transfer portal rankings. they only take into account how well teams did bring in players. But my setup here is Evan. These rankings don't tell the whole story because it's also important to take into account what teams lost key pieces to the portal. And there's some teams that are very clear losers because they lost big pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I'll probably go just maybe a little bit out of order here. I want to do my kind of top losers, and then I want to send it over to Cameron only because I think some of our winners are going to be pretty overlapping here. But from a losing perspective, number one loser, I got USC. They had such an up and down season, and a lot of that had to do with their offense. In the transfer portal, went almost all of their major wide receivers. If they don't pick up some talent fast, and I have not looked up who they're bringing in for the new recruiting class or anything like that. But if they don't pick up some talent fast, then they are not going to have any sort of offense. And Lincoln Riley is going to find himself in a really difficult position next year. Next, I've got Purdue. Okay. Purdue, obviously,
Weren't they like
not a
1-11 this
powerhouse.
season
Okay, all right. Don't judge the spoiler makers. Okay. They can always pull out one or two, Yes, but yeah, they
against
only
a
won.
team?
Fine.
All
Yes, they
state,
only won
all
one
state,
game.
maybe.
Whatever. But this was kind of an oddity of a season for Purdue. They have not been a top team, but they've at least been a respectable team over the last few years. This year, they've lost some players, and to say the least, they've also lost one of their top defensive tackles, Help, who is now going to Clemson, who Dabo Sweeney figured out how to do something from the transfer portal
He has
and
to.
got a
He has
pretty
to.
good, exactly. Yeah, and he's got a pretty good defensive player coming in. Lastly, I've got Colorado. It was kind of sad. Colorado, they have such big NIL money, and they've picked up some really good players. And I know Cameron's going to disagree with me on this, with having them as a loser. They
I
have
had them as
not
a
picked
loser
up.
too.
Oh, you did? Okay. Well,
Yeah, I did.
the thing is, they have not picked up pretty much any player that they actually need. They've picked up players all over the place, but none in terms of linemen, which they absolutely need to protect their quarterback next year. And they need it in so many different areas. They are picking up some really, really good one-off players, but not necessarily something that is going to absolutely complement the team, which is where I think the college football is going, especially with the transfer portal and NIL, and we'll talk about all that way later.
Mhm.
But when you're trying to make college football a lot more, let's just say it, like the NFL, where your coach kind of needs to be your GM too, you've got to start recruiting players that are going to be complementary to actually help you win, not just necessarily that one star player. And Colorado's not doing that. Cam?
All right. So you hit on one of mine, one of my losers. That was Colorado. They have a ton of NIL money. Obviously, you got Dion out there. You have the Travis Hunter roster. You have so much talent that kind of was there. And now that we're watching that class actually go to the next level, I don't know that they're ready to rebound. And it doesn't look like they are. The other two teams that I had to note were sadly my own team, Alabama, who is currently ranked number 67 by On3. They have lost 24 players in the portal. I swear, every time that I pick up my phone at noon over the last 3 weeks or so, I have found out that we have lost another player. The irony
Mm.
is, now I've learned that over the last month, that's almost the full days of the month. Yeah, we actually have, and it sucks. We
Hey,
have
Evan and
gained
I don't
six
feel
new
bad for
play.
you. We don't feel bad for you one
Yeah,
Not
bit.
at all.
We're not crying a
Could
pity
tear
care
me,
at
less,
all.
actually.
pity me, please. Now, the one saving grace here is that while we have lost a lot of talent, there's some that we have regained. We have a Colorado, Miami, Texas A&M, and Florida transfer. And the other really big call out is there are two ways to build a program. Florida State did it one of them, and Alabama has historically done it the other. Florida State won with transfers, same with Colorado. And you have Alabama that has historically won with recruiting. This year, Alabama is ranked number 2 in the country when it comes to actual high school recruiting, which to me, I love, but you have to have players that are willing to buy in and stay there. That's the harder part is not only do you buy in once, but you have to buy in for the entire time that you're in school. So we'll see how that works out. The next team that I had to mention is Florida. Florida is currently ranked in the 60s as well. Billy Napier may be in for a little bit of a hard season as well, but he also is ranked number 11 in recruiting. So here I am looking at it. You look at like long term or longevity, and I think that Florida may be in a little bit better situation than we might lead on. But they did lose 17 players to the portal, and they've only gotten 5 back, including only 1 4-star athlete. So we'll see what happens there.
Did you guys know that, and I didn't know this because I was doing research on the transfer portal today, but you can enter the portal after it ends if your team is still playing. So,
Correct.
so teams that are playing the national championship game, they have until January 25th or 26th, whatever that 5-day mark is, to enter the portal. I didn't know that. I thought that was pretty cool. I thought that eased some of my issues with the system. The second window opens April 16th, runs through April 25th. More than 1,200 FBS players entered the portal during the spring window last cycle. Basically, we're going to see a lot more people moving as we move on into the spring.
Number 1, and I got to give them full credit. Yeah, they're on here at number 2. Texas Tech. Next season, I really think you guys are looking pretty positive. You guys were 8-5 this year. You have quarterback Bear, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this right. Baron Morton, 3,300 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 8 picks. He didn't play in the bowl game, so that actually reduces some of his yards down due to an injury. But I love how this team kind of sticks together. They didn't lose a whole heck of a lot, and they're obtaining 9 4-star athletes going into next season, leading everyone. They have new running backs, defensive end, multiple corners, offensive lineman, and receiver. Expect a really big splash next year from Texas Tech in the Big 12. Really like how they look. The other 2 winners that I have Ole Miss and the Fighting Kiffins. I will forever be a Lane Kiffin supporter. I love it. I think he's fantastic. You know, just a perennial powerhouse in the portal. He'll continue on that trend. Joey Freshwater is very, very much a real thing.
We won't get into why
Uh,
he's called that, but go on.
oh God, can we do Joey? Can we do a whole episode on Joey Freshwater?
That's going to have to be the rated R version of our show.
Let's
We
let's
can
keep
do we
going.
can do interviewees as well.
Let's not get sidetracked. Get to your other winner.
Last but not least, as by on 3, I did not go by 247 Sports, and they probably wouldn't be ranked in the top 25 anyway. But I want to go ahead and say Clemson. They have actually landed 2 athletes, and they have only lost 5 in the portal. And they're ranked, I think, in the high 20s as far as recruiting. I know that they aren't pulling the most talent, but they also aren't losing much talent. I look at this as they are starting, Dabo is actually starting to lean into the portal. He's starting to accept the fact that it exists, and he's starting to accept the fact that he needs to buy in order to try and reclaim some of what he had in his earlier years. The league is shifting. He needs to buy in. He's figuring it out. I think something actually does need to be said, though, that he is trying. Evan, over to you.
Yeah, agree about Dabo. I mean, I hope it's not too little, too late on his part. I don't necessarily think it is because he is amazing from a high school recruiting perspective. He's a big name coach, you know, all that kind of stuff. But the transfer portal has certainly evened out the playing field from a lot. The only one that I have different from Cam on this one is Oklahoma. And no, they are not ranked high. But to my point earlier from getting people that you actually need. They've got John Mateer, I believe, who's a 4-star transfer quarterback from Washington State. He had over 3,100 yards last season, 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Great quarterback. Oklahoma really, really struggled on offense this year. Their defense was fantastic, but they could not score the ball except for Alabama. Sorry, Cameron, not that sorry.
Thank you.
Uh,
24 to
yeah.
3 hurt.
On the and including that, they've also got some pretty good wide receiver talent coming in. No huge names, but the two complementing each other, assuming the O line can actually, stand up next year and not be so worn out from going three and out almost every drive. This could be a whole different Oklahoma team that we saw a couple years ago, not the one that we saw this past year.
So I believe it's funny you say Oklahoma because one site had Oklahoma and Arkansas as the biggest losers because I think both of them lost 30 players. So I guess in your case, it's addition by subtraction.
Yeah.
Across the board, LSU was the clear winner on most of the sites I looked at. Most people said they just addressed their needs the best out of anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And LSU did a great job. The where my mind goes is not necessarily just the best players coming in, which yeah, LSU did a pretty good job of that as well with Chip Kelly filling out some good spots. But when I look at what teams brought in the players that they needed the most at the right positions, that's where I would say Texas Tech, Ole Miss, and Oklahoma.
Alrighty. Cam, any last thoughts on the transfer portal before we move on?
Nothing from me.
We have history on the show today. This is our first ever comment in the 5 episodes we've done. I believe this was posted after episode 2. Henry Allen 6475. Henry's a great name. That's my son's name. So I'm going to read you guys what he said. And then, Henry, I'm not going to lie. We're just going to be honest with you. Hindsight's 2020, but we're just going to be straight with you. So Henry said, one thing I'm not totally sure I agree with you on is the Penn State hype. Would love to hear what you guys think, but to me, Penn State looked bad. The SMU QB pretty much threw the game away by making poor decisions. I thought the Penn State offense looked bad, bad, bad in the first half and got bailed out by the pick sixes. Let me know what you guys think. I'd love to hear your predictions for the next round. And just to remember, this was after their first round game. So, Kim, let's start with you. What's your comment here for Henry?
Pick sixes play into a win. Drew Aller doesn't have to play lights out. You have 2,000-yard backs. I look at this team. Yeah, they're pretty loaded. They don't have to control time of possession in order to win a game when that really is their essence or the way that they should be winning. Uh, they're going to be really hard to beat. I think somebody like in Ohio State, quite frankly, maybe the only one of those three teams that are in there that can beat them. Uh, but yeah, that's my fundamental thoughts. I think they are deserving of all of the hype that they're receiving.
Yeah. So I'll just say, first of all, people keep commenting. We'd love
Yeah.
to keep this as
Yeah.
a regular thing here, and respond to your comments on the show. All I gotta say is, I mean, the old saying is what? Defense wins championships, and when you're getting pick six, that's gonna obviously help towards that. And even just turnovers in general, they're going to set you up for good field position. Three and outs, same deal. On the flip side, Penn State, they've got such a well-rounded team, and yeah, they've had a couple of hiccups along the way against some really good teams. I'm not saying that they're the front runner in this at all. However, with the teams that are left, they probably have one of the more rounded teams in all of those.
I will make one more comment because I do think there is one point of validity, and that is strength of schedule in order to get to where they are. There is no conversation about what team had the easiest path to where they are. Getting to this semifinal game, having to go through Boise State and SMU is borderline pathetic,
Mhm.
especially when you look at how good or how bad that they actually were. That said, Penn State did what they had to do to get here. I think that they are more than able to beat a Notre Dame team and probably more than able to beat a Texas. But yeah,
Now,
I think they
now
are worth the hype.
now that we've isolated all the SMU and Boise State fans by calling them pathetic,
Mhm.
uh, yeah, totally agree. Though, yeah, it's really not a conversation as to who had the best road here. Hardest road, also not a conversation. Everybody else just kind of fighting for it. But yeah, Penn State's just gotten better and better throughout, especially the postseason. That SMU team, they almost had a glimpse of a comeback. We were all hoping for it. Trust me. I really, really wanted a game to watch in the first round, but we just didn't get it.
All right. Well, we'd like to thank Henry for commenting and Cam. What should people do immediately after they watch this episode?
If you enjoyed this, please like, share, and subscribe because we genuinely enjoy doing this. Doesn't
And
cost you
comment.
anything, and we really enjoy this.